Okay, well, thanks for the amazing introduction. And yes, I was amazed to receive an award from EGU 2 years ago, and then EGU was kind of not cancelled, but it was online. The award was kind of pushed back, and then I was on maternity leave last year, so I'm actually going to EGU next week to accept the awards. That will be fun. But yeah, it was a huge honor also to be invited here to speak. I used to live in America. I did a postdoc at the University of Oregon and then at Colorado State University. So it's really nice to be back in Colorado. It's always breathtakingly beautiful to return. Beautiful place. So yeah, I'm going to be presenting some research that I started as a PhD student at ETH Zurich more than 10 years ago now, that has recently been kind of completed, kind of wrapped up by Jacob Hirschberg, who has just defended his PhD last year at ETH Zurich also, and the WSL in Switzerland. So I want to give him a lot of credit for a lot of the work that I'm going to be showing. So I'm going to be referring a lot to debris flows. So just, I guess I need to come off the pointer to see. Hopefully that works. Okay. That's not a good start. There we go. Hopefully that's not too loud. So debris flows. Oh, I can see it properly on this screen. I don't know what I just did. Sorry. Okay. I think I maybe pressed like a scream option. Okay. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'll keep on talking whilst he gets that to play. Yeah, it's next slide. Okay, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, this one went on for about 15 minutes, but we'll stop there. Great. Sorry, that was kind of loud. Okay, perfect. Thanks. So thinking about research into climate change impacts on debris flows, there have been studies that posit that there should be an increase under climate change, because we all know that rainfall intensities are increasing, which can trigger debris flows, and then sediment supply is increasing in sort of many mountainous regions through processes like permafrost thaw and glacier retreat. But it's potentially not as simple as that, because other studies have found that drier summers may mean fewer potential debris flows, just due to fewer potential debris flow triggering runoff events. Does this sound okay on the microphone, by the way? Because, yeah, okay. So yeah, there are lots of kind of factors involved in kind of climatic triggering of debris flows that may change in kind of different directions and interact in sort of difficult to understand ways. So that makes predicting climate change impacts on debris flows really challenging, and this is also made challenging due to internal climate variability, which is kind of an irreducible source of uncertainty that gives a really low signal to noise ratio. There's just so much noise in what the climate is going to do in the future that it can be hard to detect, how the geomorphic impact of that. And then sediment and storage and thresholds in mountain basin sediment cascades. Sediment will often get kind of stored and remobilized in multiple cycles, producing a really non-linear response. Sometimes an intense rainfall event in the Ilgraben will trigger a debris flow, and sometimes it won't. And as I showed in my own research, this is due to kind of sediment availability. So in this research, we aim to use a novel chain of models to assess climate change impacts on mountain basin sediment transfer over the 21st century. The Ilgraben is an ideal natural laboratory to look at this. It's been kind of heavily instrumented since around the year 2000 with rain gauges, geophones, other instruments used to capture kind of properties of debris flows as they travel through the system. So this is a catchment in southwest Switzerland in the Rhone River Valley. There's also a long time series of aerial photographs, which I used in the first part of my PhD to quantify slope failure processes at the head of the Ilgraben. So these slopes just up here, this is just a DEM of difference showing some of those slope failures in dark red. So yeah, we have kind of all of this understanding of the system, which went into building a model of a mountain basin sediment cascade model, which is kind of more like some of these hydrological models, these kind of bucket models. So it's quite simplified, it's spatially lumped. Initially, I designed it at daily resolution in MATLAB, and I wasn't a coder, so I kind of muddled my way through with some help of some other PhD students in the group I was in, and my supervisors. And yeah, basically this is kind of maybe looking a bit intimidating, this diagram, but you have to come over here. Yeah, we have kind of climate input data, so daily time series of temperature and precipitation through a simple degree day snowmelt model that produces a time series of snowmelt, rainfall into kind of a basin-wide water storage reservoir. We have a sediment input, a landslide magnitude frequency distribution from my photogrammetry work of slope failures at the head of the catchment. And this is kind of a stochastic component of the model. These failures get triggered by climate based on a variety of different triggering procedures. And then we get sediment ultimately ending up in the channel where it can be remobilized by runoff events if they exceed a triggering threshold. And then this produces kind of debris flows like across a range of sort of supply limited and transport limited events. So yeah, despite the fact that the model is really kind of simplistic, it did a good job at reproducing kind of first order characteristics of debris flows, like the probability of having a debris flow for a range of different rainfall event magnitudes, kind of seasonal timing of debris flows, but it was never intended to actually predict the exact timing of debris flows because of the kind of stochasticity in landslide sediment supply that's kind of hard to solve. And it showed the importance of sediment supply and antecedent moisture for being able to correctly understand debris flow generation. So this was published back in 2014 in Water Resources Research. And since then, Jacob Hirschberg took over and developed this. And it's now at an hourly resolution in Python, and I think much more user-friendly. I still use my old MATLAB version in some teaching. I haven't quite got to grips with Jacob's Python version yet, but I intend to do so because I think probably be a better experience for the students. And this is on the CSDMS website. So yeah, we basically force this SEDCAS model as part of a model chain, starting with CH 2018. This is the Swiss, kind of the latest Swiss climate change scenarios for the most extreme RCP of 8.5. These then produce factors of change, which go into a weather generator of an old colleague of mine, Simone Fatichi. And this produces kind of lots of possible time series of precipitation and temperature hourly time series, timescale that then feed SEDCAS for 3 periods in the future over the 21st century. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show some results with some sources of uncertainty, and the two sources of uncertainty come from climate models. So 10 climate models were used out of, I think, a possible 31 for this range of products, and then 30 parameter sets for each of the 10 climate models were produced by the weather generator. So this forms climate model uncertainty, and this forms the internal climate variability. So this is kind of the first time that this combination of models has been used. We believe it's the first geomorphic application of these particular Swiss climate change scenarios. And we think it's the first alpine geomorphic climate change study at an hourly resolution. So just to show what the model predicts in terms of future changes in temperature and the uncertainty in these. So unsurprisingly, there's a pretty strong and consistent climate change signal in temperature. You can see the difference in annual temperature between the current day and the 3 future periods that the model considers, 2035, 2060, and 2085. So there are particularly large increases in temperature in the summer. And remember that this is for the most extreme RCP scenario of 8.5. And in this case, most uncertainty comes from the climate model. But we can be confident in all of these changes. So in contrast for precipitation, things are much more uncertain, but we can see that there will be drier summers, especially by the end of the century, and slightly wetter shoulder seasons and winter. There's not much change in total precipitation. We also looked at rainfall intensities, which isn't shown here, but they will increase apart from the winter, and the number of dry days in the summer will increase with no precipitation. These have implications for the runoff events that trigger debris flows. So debris flow triggering runoff events will increase. You can see here on the y-axis the number of events that exceed this threshold for debris flow triggering in hours per year in the reference period in grey and the 3 future periods. And you can see a very clear increase, particularly by the end of the century. Not so much in the summer because the increased dryness counteracts the increased rainfall intensity. But in the shoulder seasons, we might expect more debris flows to happen. Okay, so I want a show of hands of who thinks debris flow generated sediment yield will increase in the future. Okay, that's about half the room. And who thinks kind of the opposite, who thinks there'll be a decrease? Okay, just a few. Okay, well, part of the story that we still need to hear about is sediment production. We have shown in previous research, one of my PhD papers, that this likely occurs by frost cracking on days with no snow cover on the hill slope up here, and days that still have fluctuations below 0 degrees. I think Francis, who I can see sitting in the back, had a nice paper that I was involved in reviewing. So I think you showed the same thing, Francis, that this kind of frost cracking process is really important in the chalk cliffs catchment in Colorado. So basically, we expect a decrease in the number of freezing days, shown in the left here, an increase in the number of snow-free days, which will result in a decreasing trend of less landslides into the future between the current day on the left-hand side and 2085. And this is at the elevation of the Illgraben. So in fact, Greg and a couple of other hands, you were right, there will be a decrease in future sediment yield, particularly in the summer months. an overall decrease in sediment yield by debris flows of 50% by the end of the century, although these are only significant by 2085, and kind of high uncertainties with climate model uncertainty and internal climate variability contributing equally. But sediment production is highly elevation dependent. So we repeated this for a catchment of a hypothetical elevation of 2,500 meters. And although we have the same decrease in freezing days and increase in snow-free days, the number of freezing days is still high enough to result in an increase in landslides in the future. So results would be different for catchments of different elevations. So in conclusion, for the Ilgraben by the end of the century, for this RCP 8.5 that we considered, though runoff events with the potential to trigger debris flows increase, a reduction in freeze-fall weathering, which we believe to be the main process of sediment generation in the Ilgraben, means that the number of debris flows will decrease by 25%, sediment yield will decrease by 50%. So this is kind of often surprising when I communicate this result. Opposite trends are expected for higher elevations. And obviously there's a lot of uncertainty here also in the sediment production mechanism. So thanks, sorry if I've gone a bit over my time. Just wanted to give credit to Jacob Hirschberg, who did the modeling, this climate change impact assessment, and Peter Molnar here and Brian McArdle, who were both of our PhD advisors, and Simone Fatiki, who's responsible for the weather generator. So thanks very much.
From hill slopes, like you have reduced amount of freeze-thaw events, and is that a reason? I couldn't get that part.
Yeah, so landslides triggered by events that happen, so freezing events that happen when the slope is snow-free in the model. Then you can have an event triggered from the magnitude frequency distribution that feeds the model. Yeah.
But how do you relate that in your model? What was the process? What was how do you relate the freeze-thaw to landslides?
Well, that's just a condition in the model that if you have a snow-free day and the temperature drops below 0, then you will have landslides. So you will have a landslide. So although the number of snow-free days increases in the future, so more exposure of the hill slope to thermal weathering, to frost cracking, the temperature will get so high that you don't have very many days that go below 0 degrees anymore. So you don't have as many triggering events. Obviously, at higher elevations, you still get the same like decreases in snow cover, so more potential for thermal weathering, and you still get a reduction in freezing days, but the temperatures are still low enough at a higher elevation that you still have, the kind of increased exposure of the slope by having less snow cover kind of wins out, if you get me.
Thank you.